Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Marlow. I'm editor-in-chief of Breitbart News. I'm also a radio host and a best-selling author. And today I want to tell you a story. I want to go back in history all the way back to 2012. Some of you are old enough to remember 2012, though not all of you, because it's turning point. But that's okay. It was a rough and dramatic year for us at Breitbart News. It was the year that our founder, Andrew Breitbart, passed away. For those of you who don't know Andrew, I recommend his book, Righteous Indignation. But Andrew was a journalist. He was an activist. At times, he was a comedian. And our favorite was when Andrew was all the above. That was the best. And he died suddenly at the age of 23. And if that wasn't 43. If that wasn't dramatic enough, it was less than a week before Andrew was going to relaunch his biggest media vision yet, a all-encompassing right-of-center newspaper for the digital age, Breitbart.com. And he designed it all himself, and he gave it that kind of cool Halloween-y orange and black scheme that you see today if you go to our website. And all of a sudden, he passed away. But the drama for that year was just beginning because, you might recall, it was an election year. And who was on the ballot? It was Barack Obama. Now, those of you in the audience who are really old, you might remember that actually when Obama ran in 2008, he actually ran as a godlike savior who was going to save America from Americans who were ruining it, in his opinion. Let me give you some highlights from one of his speeches on the campaign trail. This is only loosely paraphrased. I'm absolutely certain that generations from now, we'll be able to look back and tell our children that this was the moment when we began to provide care for the sick and jobs for the jobless, when we came together to remake our nation, when we ended war, and most impressively, when the rise of the oceans began to slow and our planet began to heal. It's incredible. It's heroic. It's also completely absurd. Our health care under Obama got worse and more expensive. Our nation got progressively more polarized. Are you all feeling the unity today that we're experiencing? And also that year, it seems like ever since, every year is the hottest year on record. Aside from 1934. Never bring up 1934 because it ruins all the media's narratives. You can look that one up. So, ties didn't slow. Nothing good happened. And now, 2012, he had to run as a mere mortal. He had to run as a normal person. He was running on a lackluster economy. Federal spending had ballooned. The debt was insane. It still is. And then Obamacare, of course, was a disaster, both politically and it wasn't providing much care. And every day we were talking constantly about the next threat of radical Islamic terror. And then September 11th of 2012 rolls around, and what happened then? 2 diplomatic missions for the United States got attacked by Islamic radicals. This was in Benghazi, Libya. And 4 Americans died, including the ambassador, Christopher Stevens. There's a big commission report done by United States House Select Committee, and they determined that the Obama administration, specifically Hillary Clinton, was derelict in their responsibilities to those Americans in those facilities. Totally responsible. And Susan Rice, who is now one of the top officials in the Joe Biden White House now, actually blamed a YouTube video for this radical Islamic attack on Americans, not their horrible ideology. A truly horrific scheme of events. But there was a silver lining, and that silver lining was it was very clear. We were finally going to rid ourselves of Barack Obama. We were finally going to be able to end this experiment where we put a half-term senator, full-time community organizer in charge of our country. We were going to win. There's only one problem. Our nominee. Or, as I put it in the front page of Breitbart, the Romney. Now, I don't want to dwell too much on Mitt Romney and Paul Ryan, who was the vice presidential pick. The next man the establishment Republicans had planned to take the movement to the next level. But they didn't get the job done. Paul Ryan actually lost his vice presidential debate to Joe Biden. Can you imagine that? Losing a debate to a guy who can't tell the difference between his wife and his sister? So, Obama won, as we know, and Republicans began to try to pick up the pieces, try to explain to their donors how they wasted $3 billion of their money on this candidate. And you know what the conclusion they drew? They drew up this thing called an autopsy report. No one remembers it. They remember one detail. They said the main problem that the Republicans had was they weren't sufficiently pro-illegal immigration. We needed comprehensive immigration reform. What does that mean for those in the audience? Amnesty. Amnesty. That was the Republicans' problem. Amnesty. Now, I represent a website that has, I think, pretty in tune with the populist nationalist wing of the conservative movement, and immediately the audience was apoplectic. This was not the solution. This was not the way forward. And something happened. People began to fight. People were losing their mind because the Republicans were telling us that the key to success is more lawlessness. First thing, you grant immunity, amnesty to illegal aliens. The next thing, you win. It's genius, right? And, better yet, you won't get called a racist. The W. The only problem is, argument was totally false. Most illegal aliens are actually economic migrants, so they're coming here for money. And so who are they going to vote for? They're going to vote for the party that gives the most handouts, gives the most money, and gives them the most economic incentive. There's another major issue, which is that there's a language barrier. And I'm very critical of the conservative movement in this. The left puts out their content in Spanish. Do you guys read a lot of conservative articles, listen to a lot of conservative radio in Spanish, those of you Spanish speakers? No, we don't do it. We've failed in this regard. Right now, George Soros is buying up radio stations to put left-of-center content on the air in Spanish. It's a lesson we never learned. So the point is, how is this allegedly national, this inevitable contingency of eventual Republicans, and eventual conservatives, going to even know they're conservative, they're not getting our values? It became clear that the establishment didn't really care because this was not about the conservative movement at all. This was about importing a cheap class of labor to lower the wages of Americans, to create more competition, and to raise their stocks just a little bit. This was the work of the Republican donor class. So it wasn't about the future of the movement. It was about these cheap workers. It was all a hoax perpetrated by the establishment. And this was just too much to bear for the populist wing of the movement. So, as the expression goes, it was on. There was a civil war, ideologically, that took place. And it was clear that there was a need to throw out the Republican establishment, remove the globalists from power, and then we could start the hard work of boldly trying to save our country. And I'm pleased to say that that's more or less what happened. Flash forward to 2015, and all of a sudden, into 2016, conservatives literally united behind a chant of build the wall, build the wall, build the wall, build the wall, build, and you make Mexico pay for it. This is just 3 years after we were told by the people running the party we needed to not only not have a wall, we need to tell everyone who's here illegally, you get amnesty. This is a huge thing. So what happened to Paul Ryan? Paul Ryan retired from politics. Mitt Romney basically became a Democrat and a laughingstock. So, yeah, and then the battle was largely won. So, why the history lesson? Why am I spending all this time in December of 2022? This is my first lesson for all of you today. Sometimes when we fight, we win. Sometimes when you fight, you win. Lesson number one. You would have thought it was an impossible task to wrestle away an entire movement from these people that already had so much power and so much money, and so many people and so many corporate interests, so much invested in it. And to not only beat them, but to beat them in just an election cycle, one single election cycle. And this is the spirit that continues today at Breitbart and elsewhere in places like Turning Point. Recently, we were examining a bill called the JCPA, and this turned into a big battle, the Journalism, Competition, and Preservation Act. It's essentially a slush fund for the establishment journalists. And the plan was to add this to a bill for our national defense, funding our national defense. Only in Washington can something so awful be possible, and yet that's exactly what was happening. So what did we do? We fought. Lo and behold, the JCPA didn't make it into the NDAA. Thumbs up to all of you who got involved. And so this handout for the fake news did not make it into this crucial bill, because we all know that the fake news is the enemy of the people, okay? Believe me. But that's actually not the best part. Because when we fought the JCPA, you know what else came out? The military vaccine mandate came out of the NDAA. And you know what else came out? Chuck Schumer had a new scheme to make it easier for marijuana businesses to do banking. Why was that in our national defense bill? It's all out. Because sometimes when you fight, you win. So Now, these past couple of years, we've had a lot of fights, and not all of them have gone well. I admit that. But there's been a lot of progress made. First of all, things could be much worse. I want to give you some examples. Russia. How are they doing with Ukraine right now? They're getting embarrassed in their own backyard. How about Iran? Iran's had to face 2 months of protests over their morality police. Yes, there is a country in 2022 that has morality police. How about Europe? Home of Davos, Brussels, the breeding ground of globalist thought. Right? This is where the global anti-climate change movement, its heartbeat is there, the World Economic Forum. They're in such a big energy crisis now, they're actually bringing back online coal-fired plants that they'd shut down to fight the existential threat of climate change. I was very naughty, and I want them all to get a lot of coal for Christmas in Europe. Okay, finally China, and I could spend the rest of the speech on China. Their top tech companies, Alibaba and Tencent, lost over $1 trillion in a year. One of their key stock markets is down 36% over a year. Their property market is in a crisis. Not only did they cause the pandemic, but they had the single worst response to it. And there's even in China with no free press, you're starting to see the people rise up against the Emperor Xi Jinping, who's trying to solidify himself as having the most power since Mao Zedong. So all these problems pale in comparison to America. And so while politically we have a lot of work to do, there is some good news happening. First of all, the top-down COVID authoritarianism that we saw, it's beginning to get reeled back in. I'm starting to see more accountability for the people who locked us down and harmed our children. Though I have to say, I was driving around LA recently, and I saw way too many of the people alone in their cars with the cloth face diapers on their face. These people need to be studied by science. And this time science has to tell the truth about what they find, okay? So lately, if you spend any time online, I know you guys do, we have the Twitter files. So we're learning the extent to which conservatives have been censored online. Now, I don't know if we learned anything new. We knew that the Hunter Biden laptop from hell was censored. We knew that Charlie Kirk was censored. We knew that Breitbart News was censored. By the way, we've been censored since going back to 2016, 2017, when the original shadow banning took place. And of course, we were called conspiracy theorists, because we were pointing out that our content wasn't reaching our own followers. So Elon Musk isn't telling us anything we don't know, but we finally have the receipts. This is a huge development. And I think it's a big blow to global authoritarianism. And I will tell you right now, if there is anyone in the audience today who is working at Google or is working at Meta, if you come out and blow the whistles on these tech giants who have way too much power, who are censoring legitimate thought for no good reason other than their own political gain, you'll be welcomed by this movement with a hero's welcome. So please, come forward, blow the whistle on these horrible companies. So what I am saying is there is unity on the right in terms of what are the key values these days. From focusing on inflation to sky-high gas prices, to the threat of an open border, to our hatred of the establishment media, to the hatred of the big tech elite, to the threat China poses to our country, to desire to bring back American jobs in manufacturing and bring regulation down. There's universality in all these values. The Second Amendment, the right to keep and bear arms shall not be infringed. So long as that is the case, you will have unity on the right over these values. How about getting fed up with cutting blank checks to foreign countries without knowing where the money is going or what we're getting back? And I'm looking at you, Ukraine, on that one. Now take the issue of abortion. This one's a little more complicated. The Democrats used it to their advantage politically. But personally, for me, I believe there's a few things in life that are more important than just a couple political victories, and one of those things is life itself. So, one of the refrains we've seen trying to make sense of the 2022 elections is that candidates matter. Okay? Candidates matter. You've heard that. So, I'm going to try to refute that with three words. Senator John Fetterwoman. So I'm going to try to keep it classy. I'm not going to dwell on all of the crazy utterances he said in the campaign trail. And I will not mention that giant growth in the back of his neck that is still unexplained. Will not bring that up. But his brain's scrambled. He's got a scrambled brain. He can't compute what he hears, and he can barely speak. And even though he plays a blue-collar guy on TV, do you know that he has a degree from Harvard and lived off of his parents until his 40s? So, not really the populist guy with the shorts and the big hoodie, is he? He's all propped up. He's propped up by a left-wing movement and must be a crazy family to put him out there like that. And now, on MSNBC, a host named Katie Tur suggested he could be a presidential candidate. Isn't that something? Hey, candidates matter. He would definitely have the biggest growth of any candidate if he did it. So, if you're not convinced by this argument, let me give you two more words. Tony DeLuca. Now, have you ever heard of Tony DeLuca? He was reelected to Pennsylvania Senate last month. You probably haven't heard of him because he's dead. Tony's dead. Doesn't matter. He still won. So, you see my point. So, what does matter? What does matter? We've got the right values. The candidate's not going to deal with that. What does matter? It actually is coming back to my story at the beginning of the talk, community organizing. So, don't laugh, but we actually have to learn from Barack Obama in this regard. How else could Joe Biden and John Fetterman and the dead guy from Pennsylvania win elections? It's community organizing. It is people getting organized. That is how you explain any left-wing success that we're having in this country. So, how do we do that? That's for a different time, probably a different venue. But if we have learned anything, it's that it is not necessarily about who's on the ballot or what is on the ballot. It is that the ballot physically goes into the ballot box. So I became editor-in-chief of Breitbart in 2013, just after Obama was inaugurated for a second term. And it surprised a lot of us at the time. In retrospect, it was not at all surprising. And he beat those conservatives who thought that the future of the movement was about amnesty for illegal aliens. So then we had our Civil War, which we won, which is great. So where do we go from here? So now we have a choice. The choice is we can either go one of two directions. We can stop working. We can Netflix and chill. And we can feel content that we have the best values, we have the funniest memes, and we have the best looking women. All of these are true, scientific fact. So we can feel content in that and continue to lose. Hey, but we're right, feeling good about it. Or we take a different approach. We take the approach the left has been taking. We take those lessons of Barack Obama and Mark Elias and George Soros and the World Economic Forum, and we get organized. So my mission for you today is I want you to appreciate that America is still the last best hope for the earth. Despite the best efforts of the left, we enjoy most of the freedoms our founding fathers left us, and many others that they probably hadn't even thought of. But most importantly, I want to get you fired up. I want you to engage in the process at a civic level, even more deeply than you had in the past. I want you to put in the hard work, and I still want you to have fun and be fearless. But most importantly, we have to get organized. And if we do that, this country will see the strongest conservative movement that we've ever seen. Thank you very much. I'm Alex Marlow. Have a great rest of your conference.